It's something that Americans take for granted. I know that I have certainly throughout my lifetime. We walk over to a faucet and out comes running water. Or we pour ourselves a glass of water, we take a shower. We don't give really any thought to this. But perhaps we should, because the system is beginning to crumble. America's water infrastructure, the pipes, the treatment plants, the distribution systems, they're all aging. They're all getting older. They're underfunding. And this is leading to frequent water breaks, water contamination, and potential health risks. And this is what we're going to focus on today. Today, I have with me Riggs Eckelberry. He is the founding CEO of OriginClear, and he has developed innovative solutions to help businesses face rising water bills by tapping into new investment markets. Riggs deploys his personal break to build process to help rebuild the water industry, which has really reached a critical breaking point in recent years, despite being absolutely an essential resource for our health, our survival, our planet's survival. Welcome to the show, Riggs.
Carol, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, let's get a little bit of your backstory. How did you get to where you are today and why water?
Thank you. Well, you were mentioning break to build, and actually I'm a avid rower. I rowed in high school, and then later in Los Angeles, I did a lot of rowing as a master. Old guy rowing. And at one point we were rowing in the Loyola Marymount Boathouse as guests, and a new coach came in, and he had created T-shirts for all of the Loyola Marymount crew, which said "Break to Build." Now, what was he trying to do? He was trying to. They were not going to win with the habits they had, so they had to completely nuke those and start fresh, just zero out, and then build from there. Now, that's a really, really good philosophy because it recognizes the truth, which is you've got certain things built in that are holding you back. So just break it down. Now, here's what's interesting. The water industry, which I'll get into shortly because I know you want my origin story, is already broken. So we kind of have to sweep the stuff aside and create something that's sustainable. My background really is, and the reason I'm not a Facebook multimillionaire, but instead I'm in water, is because from day one, I worked early on in the nonprofit space, making not a lot of money, but supposedly saving the world. And then continued to do that. In the 80s, I got super excited about technology. The 90s was my playground with the .com, and we had all this amazing, exits. We just sold the company. Oh my gosh, and it was 4 months later. It's like, what? So unreasonable expectations probably, but there was a crazy time there. And post 2000, we also had a lot of fun building businesses, getting them onto the NASDAQ and so forth. I was invited to become a CEO for the first time by a fund that was pivoting from tech into green at the time. And back then in 2006, 2007, green was everything. Of course, we've since learned that it's very hard to make money in green unless you're living off subsidies. So what we were doing initially, we launched the amazing, to this day, an amazing concept, which is making crude oil fresh from algae, the way it was made originally by nature, make it fresh now in basically cook up crude oil. That was all great. And I even debated Jim Rogers on Bloomberg, all kinds of great stuff happened. But the problem was that the price of oil needs to be more than $100 to make it happen. And fracking put an end to that. All of a sudden, we were not at $120. We were at 50 or less. And it's going back there now. So it's very, very hard to replace oil with something like that, even though it's so romantic and people loved it so much. Well, meanwhile, we had become a public company. So 3 or 4 years, doing algae for biofuels was great, except that it wasn't going to work. Fortunately, our process of basically how do you get the algae out of the water became how to get sewage out of water. So we pivoted into water treatment, but that was not as exciting as algae. People were not in love with it. Stuart Varney called me. He said, "I will call you Algae Man." That didn't happen with water. He didn't. I will call you Aquaman. Didn't happen, right? So water is, as you said in the intro, taken for granted. And the other thing is we're told everything's fine, the water's fine. But, it has been coming out, all kinds of things have been coming out in the wash, including this big problem with plastics, right?
Mhm.
Forever chemicals. And, now I can't even drink water from coffee from a paper cup because it's got plastic in it. It's like, oh Lord, it's all of a sudden we're finding out, it's kind of like when you pull up a rock and all kinds of bugs, put it back down. Never mind, no rock, no bugs. So but so we're starting to get into the fluoride and the plastics and the forever chemicals, and all that is super important. But we have to step back to what's really going on first and foremost with just getting clean water, right? And the National Society of Civil Engineers has estimated that by just 2029, 4 years from now, we will need $5 billion every year to rebuild the
Wow.
central infrastructure. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a new force in town in Washington, and they're not going to spend $430 billion on
No.
anything, right? So what's the solution? It's not going to happen. So we're just going to let it all return to the terrible state that India is in, where people die in sewage gas explosions and all that. No, we need to maintain our high standards. The basic flaw with water infrastructure in this country is centralization. The idea that everybody can send their stuff to the central resource, and that's very efficient. That was the same idea behind mainframes. Mainframes will handle everything. If we just, talk to the mainframe. But what happens is it's efficient for the mainframe. It's not efficient for the people. I'm old enough to remember having to sign my name in to queue up for mainframe time. These days, no, the computers wait for us, right? So
Right.
is it efficient for the computer to just sit there all day while I'm not using it? Maybe, but it's my time that matters, right? And so we flipped it around in computing to where now, we have more power in this phone than we ever had in mainframes. So, and that's a good thing. Let's do the same thing in water, because all we got to do is let's not make the central utilities do all the work. Let them do the basic stuff. Number one, they need to continue to provide clean water. Why? Because every time we privatize clean water, some idiot takes advantages of it, and the water, there's disasters. It happened in the UK. It's happened many times in the US. The minute some bright idea like, well, let's let such and such a corporation handle all our clean water, and the clean water goes somewhere else. It's like, no. So number one, government needs to give us our clean water, number one. Number two, they need to handle the residential users, right? Because they're so dispersed, and that's the basic audience is people, right? People need to be served with sanitation. There's all this big debate about vaccines and so forth, which came first. Whatever that truth about that, I'm not in that fight, but we know for sure that at the beginning of the 20th century, sanitation was a huge factor in improving human health. So let's not go backwards. So how do we handle it? Government handles those things, but business needs to get off the grid immediately, because the very toxic waste. Imagine everybody's dumping this. Household waste is nothing. It's trivial. Sewage is sewage, but it's not Agent Orange. It's not really hard to clean. It doesn't have all the forever chemicals and stuff. So simplify the job for the utilities. Pull it off. It's already happening. Because why? Because the utilities are falling apart. They're saying, no, we can't handle it. They're telling breweries, they're telling factories, they're telling trailer parks, we can't handle your water. Go away, right? So it's happening all over the country. We've been building our business on a very simple premise, which is treat on-site, meaning full decentralization of water treatment. And what we have is these cool little pods that handle the whole thing. And we've miniaturized this giant process of water treatment down to these 20 or 40-foot containers. And they go into a business, get plugged in, and they handle all the wastewater treatment needs. So who's adopting this? Well, for example, there's a huge real estate boom north of Dallas, from Dallas to the Oklahoma border. They're not building sewage plants, right? So people are putting up housing developments as fast as they can. Right now, we're in talks with a national home manufacturer who plans to build in automatically. They build a new development. They don't even bother hooking up to sewage. It's all self-contained. So self-contained sewage treatment is where it's at. And what's great about it, our technology is it's no muss, no fuss. You drop it in place. You don't need a water expert. It's fully supported. And we even help with the capital needs. So, basically we're making it super, super easy. And what's happening is our business is blowing up as a result. So here's my answer. The really, really good news is the infrastructure is not going to fall apart because business is going to take over. One last thing, and then I'm sure you'll have more questions, is why would businesses do it? Well, number one, they're being sued. Even though they send water to the utility, they're still being sued. So why not do it yourself? Number one. Number two, there's hyperinflation in water rates. I don't know if you've noticed in your home, but water rates are rising fast. If you have your own system, you only have the inflation of the parts, the filters, whatever. Number three, you can recycle the water and not pay more for the water coming in. And the final reason is you don't get harassed by the local government people. You just do your thing. And that is actually one of the big reasons. So that's why it's happening. It's a revolution. It's a quiet one. But this is why, to me, it's like it's a save the planet thing, because water at the end of the day, if that gets screwed up, then we're 2 days away from being a primitive society if we don't watch out.
So true. Yeah, it is a quiet revolution because I had no idea this was going on until I was doing the research for this show. Now, why should we all, this is affecting businesses, but why should the average person, like me, for instance, care about this? How does this impact the average person?
Well, first of all, 90% of water demand is by industry and agriculture. So we're solving the biggest part of it. Before I moved here in 2020, we were in California and we were taking short showers, but that only affects the 10%. It's a good slogan, get everybody on board, water conservation, but it's the rice paddies and the avocado growers and the almond growers that use up all the water. Come on. But, that's their specific problem. What we got to do at our level is make sure that our water that we use it's not being treated enough by the municipalities. They're meeting legal requirements, but the legal requirements are too lenient. And your audience can go to the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org/tapwater. You put that in, and it says, what's your zip code? Boom. And you'll find all the bad news in your zip code. And you're like, huh, what? And you realize that the science is, regulations have not kept up with science. Why? Because they wouldn't know what to do. 2 years ago, the EPA said, okay, we're going to clean up all the forever chemicals. And they gave a total to all the nation's 150, literally 150,000 water systems, $5 billion total to treat. In other words, it's an unfunded mandate. So they go, well, we don't know what to do, because it's really, really hard to take the forever chemicals out. So there are solutions, but the cities won't do it. The point I'm making is you need to have basic filtration in your home. Use a Brita filter for your drinking water. Use one of the shower filters that take the filtration down below 0.2 microns, in other words, so that it catches the Roundup, which gets into your skin. Those are the two basic things. About whole home systems and so forth. But, people may not have the budget for it. Just don't drink tap water and just filter it. That's super important.
Good advice. I know I haven't drank tap water for a very, very long time. I grew up in San Diego, and the water had such a strong amount of chlorine.
Oh my God.
You'd bring it up to your nose, and it was like standing by a pool, that kind of smell. So I got in the habit very young of drinking bottled water. And then, of course, the plastics started to play into this. So,
right.
Yeah, different things to think about. Now, what kind of resistance have you met from government? Are they resisting this movement, this decentralization?
The good news is they're not. You've heard about how solar is resisted by the energy companies. Yes. It's not the case in water, primarily because they are municipal. They're not private, and most of them are governmental. And they're overwhelmed. Like, okay, great. You can go ahead and do that. That's fine. Now, in addition, there is permitting improvements. So, for example, we're working with the state of Texas they've already approved a standard, one of those pods, pre-permitted. It can go anywhere, 5,000 gallons per day. If that's your capacity, boom, that's a typical trailer park, for example, right? So, boom, it can go right in. Months of permitting and regulation work are just zapped. We're working on that with certain, there are, Alabama, Texas, Arizona, a lot of places are forward thinking. And that's who we're working with primarily. So yeah, number one, they're in favor of it. Number two, there's work on regulation. Can we do more? Yes. But, I think that trend is well underway. The entire government is speeding up now, and it's gratifying. So I don't see a real problem. What's innovative about us is that we are funded not from big venture capital firms, but from the everyday investor who can come in and get a piece of this new asset. And, water is the new gold, as they say. So this is a very, very interesting business to invest in. The company we created, Water on Demand, is rocking. Just showed a X increase year over year between the beginning of last year and the beginning of this year. So they're exploding. Of course, I'm hearing all that. We can't handle it anymore. We got too much business. I'm like, okay, well, too bad for you. So what we're seeing now is what we're doing is ramping up the capitalization. And again, we're doing it with crowdfunding. We're doing it with regular investors, with accredited investors, high net worth investors, everybody. And we're one of the few places that people can invest in this new decentralized water game.
So interesting what you said, the comparison to gold. Can we unpack that a little bit further? What you meant by it being the new gold?
Well, water is not considered a commodity. Why? Because it has no stable price, right? Pig's bellies are a commodity because you know the price.
Right.
But water it goes all over the place. San Diego, that desal plant, the water costs $1,500 an acre foot, whereas up north, people getting water from the Colorado are paying $25 an acre foot, just because they have different water rights, right? So it's all over the place. But if business is treating their own water under contract that's being done and they're paying by the gallon, then we have a per gallon price established. And that's the beginning of a market where we're turning water into a monetizable commodity, meaning it's being standardly treated by standard processes and being financed in certain ways. And it's turning it into, okay, regardless of the original price of the water, here's what it costs to clean it and recycle it. And that it will eventually turn water into a tradable commodity, which is why it becomes the new gold. Now, there was, I often hear the story about, the Big Short, and the guy at the end says he went into water. Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you want to know what the Michael Burry, the rest of the story with Michael is he tried to go into water and he found it to be unbelievably political. He tried to working with centralized water, with big water, with the municipalities and so forth. And it was a total political game, completely lobbyist driven, etc. So what did he do? He went into agriculture as an indirect use of water. And that's, if you look at what happened to him, if you Wikipedia what that story is about, it's fascinating. If decentralized water had been available back then, that would have been a logical thing for him to do, because it breaks down the problem into regular business. It's not a big influence game anymore. It's a standard business proposition like HVAC. Every brewery needs chillers. Well, every brewery now needs wastewater treatment. That's just how it is.
Interesting. We have a lot of breweries here in Albuquerque, so I was thinking about that as you were talking. And my husband's in HVAC. He puts in the chillers, so I could relate to what you were saying. But I think it's so interesting because we have rising inflation. So do you see this as a good shelter for people as the dollar loses some of its power, as inflation goes up?
Businesses know. Look, water and sewage rates have been inflating faster than college tuition and healthcare costs. It's not advertised, but that's the fact. But people see it on their bill, especially if they're a business. Your home bill, it might go up a little bit, but the business bills are my wife has a school, so I know the bill she pays for water is stupid. It's like, what? That's ridiculous. Businesses notice this. And by adopting their own, getting away from the communal system and doing their own, well, now they have a water system, and the inflation is dramatically reduced because all it is replacement parts and the occasional service call. So it's a totally different game. The other thing that's going on is that America recycles very little water, less than 1%. The one success story is Vegas, which gets in the low 20% range, 22, 23%. Israel gets up to almost 90%. Okay. Now, that they have a very controlled economy. It's a small country. They can handle it all. We're not saying get to 90% in America, but there's a huge opportunity to reduce drought and water scarcity by businesses reusing their own water. And they save money because they're not being charged for the fresh water. So that's a good business proposition. Basically, if you think of it, the water demand as a inverted triangle, the people at the very, very bottom are the people who absolutely must have their own system because they won't get a permit for their housing development, or the trailer parks can be shut down, or various. These are people who have to do it. That's been our audience. Now it's widening to people who go, that's not a bad business proposition. And to those people, we're starting to offer financial help as well, so that it smooths out the capital needs, because nobody started a brewery to build a wastewater treatment system. Never happened, right?
Right.
You built a brewery to make beer. The problem with making beer is it takes about 7 liters of water to make 1 liter of beer. And that water doesn't go away, but it becomes effluent. Beer wastewater is not difficult to treat, but there's a lot of it. So it tends to overwhelm the central systems. Like, oh my God. And we've heard all kinds of horror stories about brewers being forced to truck their wastewater to another county. This happened in the East Bay of San Francisco. And, they had to eventually just do their own thing. So that's what's going on and on top of it, there's also, the sewage main breaks is one happening every 2 minutes in America.
Yes.
It's just
Common.
ridiculous.
Common.
Right?
Yes.
So enough. Let's just unburden the system. Let's go to self-reliant business achieving. And it will become, within 5 years, it'll be like standard. Everybody will just do it. They'll just do their own thing and it'll be fine. And that is going to be wonderful. The recycling rates are going to go up, operating costs are going to go down, and people that are still being served by the municipalities will be better served. And that is the goal in the end.
Why haven't we been recycling water until now? What's been the biggest barrier to that?
Well, you remember Greece, how the drag raced up and down those concrete rivers,
Yeah.
right? At the early part of the 20th century, the Army Corps of Engineers was building these concrete rivers to get the fresh water to the ocean as fast as possible. Get rid of the fresh water. Like, wait, we need that fresh water. No, that wasn't what they were thinking. Everything was centralized. Starting in the early part of the 20th century, all the way to the mid-century, everything was built centralized. That was a better way of doing things, right? And it turns out it's not. It's not a better way of doing things. But the problem is the technology wasn't there. The technology was not there to have 500,000 mini wastewater systems in every business. They just couldn't fathom it, right? So the reason why we don't have good recycling in this country is because all the water in LA goes to that one big Hyperion down in El Segundo, the Hyperion system. It's vast. It's huge. 85% of America's wastewater treatment is done by 15% of the wastewater systems, these big, hyper large things. The problem is, once the water goes down El Segundo, do you think it's going back out to Beverly Hills? No, it's going in the ocean. That's it. It's done. So you can, and San Diego has tried very hard to recycle. It's called toilet to tap. And I don't think people like it, the idea very much. Right? So businesses can do their own recycling. They don't have to use it for the tap water. They can use it for irrigation, washing down steam vessels and so forth. You don't have to make beer from wastewater, not necessary, but you can still recycle. So the point is, by creating self-reliance, people can recycle because it's right there. They just cleaned it. It's sitting there clean. Well, I'll just use it again, right? Now, it's not potable because it's usually not commercially, it's too expensive to make water fully potable, right? San Diego has been trying to spend billions, and then people don't like it after all that. So instead, what they do is, non-potable needs, which there's plenty of. And that is a way that we can get the recycling levels up 5-10% in the country, which will be a dramatic revolution. Huge. All that alone will alleviate things far more than tearing down dams in Stockton, right? It's going to be basically use the water you have more than once. That's it.
It makes sense. Do you think we're moving toward having it be drinking water eventually? Do you think that technology will get there?
Well, yes, the technology is there. The problem is it's very expensive. I don't know if you heard, but there was a big desalination plant that was being built over they 10 years and many millions of dollars in Huntington Beach, a desal plant. And then the city council just said, "No, we're not going to do it." Like, whoa, no desalination plant after 10 years of trying. Believe
Wow.
me, that is not going to encourage investors. So these big, giant central solutions are not happening because they're being voted down. So we're pretty much stuck with the fresh water that we have. So the first solution is to use it better. Also, not, have rice paddies in Mississippi, not in California, right? Go where the water is if it's these water intensive things. The problem is, I think that the lobbyists in Sacramento would object to that. So we're kind of stuck with almonds, but over time, I mean, hemp is a very profitable crop, and it's very, very water. It's a drought crop. So maybe California needs to rethink its cash crops a little bit.
I was thinking about it. New Mexico is very dry, or a good portion of it is. And
Yes.
water is always talk here. We always are looking at conserving it any way we can. Now, what companies are on board with this? Is it primarily agriculture? You mentioned breweries. Who else?
Okay. So OriginClear and its divisions are focused. We have one division that does the big guys like power plants. They specialize in multi-million-dollar systems for power plants. That's a very custom business. We like it because it's lots of money, but it's not very. You're not going to do 500 power plants in 5 years. There's just not that many. So the other part of our business, which is a company called Modular Water Systems, creates these little assembly line pods that are completely water system in a box with an envelope that is very, very durable. It doesn't fall apart like concrete. And it's used for wastewater treatment. It's used for the pumping systems and so forth. And our clients are anybody who's has a hard time getting to sewage. So you have mobile home parks, RV campgrounds. We relocated a car dealership in Pennsylvania to a place where the land was super cheap, but there was no sewage. Boom. We put in place what's called a black water recirculation system. Boom. And they were able to go to the cheap land. A lot of housing developments are happening really fast. There's a lot of uptake in housing developments because there's a move towards rural, right? In general, people more and more moving away from the city for various reasons, including the whole COVID thing. But these rural water systems are like, oh my God, they're overwhelmed by all the city people showing up. And you're seeing that in New Mexico, clearly, right? Santa Fe, for example, is seen a huge rush over the last 20, 30 years, right? Boomers primarily, but even younger, because you can do what we're doing, work from remote. So what do? Well, you just have the package system along with it. And so that's really what's going on is anybody who is expanding into their business, their industrial activity or their residential activity outward from central city situation, it's just a reality. They're going to have it. And that's who we deal with. And the other day, for example, there's a great picture that we have of Dan Early, who's our guru for these pod systems. He's working on one of these systems, and it was at a nuclear power plant. How cool is that? Peach Bottom. So behind him is the containment dome, and he's building a water plant for that nuclear power plant to handle the ordinary human black water, as we call it, for that power plants. It made them independent from having to deal with the municipality. So it's happening at every level. We're super excited. It's a business that, as far as we're concerned, like it's how when AT&T broke up, what came after it was much larger than AT&T was because you had the internet, you had MCI, you had this, it just blew it up. Same thing's happening in water. Water is $1 trillion industry, but it's many multiples that once you export it to individual places. And so we think it's going to go easily 10x and be more robust, more resistant to terrorist attacks, hacking, all this stuff. Centralization just is not the solution. It's just how globalization is not the solution. It's not a solution to get your t-shirts from China, right? Let the Chinese put a factory here. That's the new philosophy. Why? Well, you don't have these container ships belching smoke across the Pacific, right? So this new idea of serving people where they are is going to grow and grow and grow. It's not just a political position, it's a reality.
How long has this been going on? Because I have to say, I was very surprised, almost shocked when I did the research for this, went on to the website and took a look. I'm like, oh, wow, I had no idea.
That's Thank you. Visibility is our problem. And I'm thankful for these podcasts where we can kind of get the word out. But for me, I really became aware of it. And we bought our first company that was doing this work, the one that works with power plants in 2015. And I became aware like, wow, this is a whole movement. There was some early research that showed that this was starting to spread. And then 2018, we started a company from scratch that was this guru, this water guru, who'd been working for 20 years already doing this in laboring in the wild. And we brought him in and we started this company around him, Modular Water, to industrialize, to scale it up and create a business. It's been hard work, but now he's exploding. Like all startups, you're there far ahead of the market, right? The market is now like, people are like taking it for granted. Well, of course, right? PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, all these guys are doing their own water treatment, and all the more power to them, right? So it's happening, and it's going to, at the end, in Ireland, the fresh water is free. Well, why wouldn't it be free here? Well, if you get rid of all the industrial and agricultural users and just serve the people, maybe it will be free. That would be my dream.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. Did you meet resistance initially getting companies to come on board with this? Was it difficult? I know now they see the benefits and they're all on board, but initially, was that difficult?
Well, there's always been enough demand that we don't. The best thing marketing opportunity is one where there's pent up demand. You don't have to create that. Like, hey, guess what? You could do this. No, we have people, as I say, the base of the triangle is already the bottom end of people who must have it. There's a story, for example, this lady had a mobile home park. It was in the news. Neville Home Park. If you Google Neville Home Park, this poor lady, she was going to lose her trailer park because she didn't have adequate sanitation, and they were just going to shut her down. We didn't at the time have a solution on the capital side. We solved her problem, but she had to give away half of her ownership of that mobile home park to someone else to finance that. Well, that's not okay, right? But that's the dire problems people are running into. A good friend of mine, he had a trailer park in Troy, Alabama, and he couldn't sell it without solving he was stuck with the damn thing, and he couldn't he had to get a permit, and he couldn't pipe the water to the city. So we helped him build a system that was independent. People have been stuck with these sewage problems, largely underreported, but it's becoming real. It's starting to, just like forever chemicals. Everybody knew about chemicals for the longest time. Everybody knew about fluoride for the longest time. So these things are finally erupting, and thank goodness.
Yes, yes. I lived in Massachusetts for a period of time. My husband's originally from there, and we had moved back for him to take a job. This is several years ago. But I didn't realize till I was living there how many people are not hooked up to the city sewage system until we were living outside of the city in one of the towns along the coast. So is this going to benefit those types of people when you're talking about rural? Because Massachusetts is interesting because it's not really what you think of as rural, but you get out in these towns and a lot of them aren't hooked up to the city.
Very true. I went to school in North Andover, so I know a little
You
bit about
know,
Massachusetts. But the fact is that there's something like 24 million septic tanks out there. So these houses that you're talking about are on septic systems with a drain field, right? And that works fine, but there's two problems with it. Number one, you has to have a certain size lot. So FHA loans will not be issued if there's not enough room for that drain field, for example. Number two, a percentage of those septic tanks fail. And just like when your gut fails and all of a sudden it's a mess, same thing happens. You have untreated sewage going into the groundwater, creating bacterial and viral infections, and it's a large source of problems. So in general, municipalities and counties are trying to get rid of septic tanks, and this replaces it. I'll give an example. In Miami-Dade County, there's over 100,000 of these septic tanks, but they're all over the place, right? They're like, okay, we're going to build sewage lines to everybody. It'll cost $6 billion. No, it won't. First of all, it'll take 20 years. Secondly, it'll cost you $20 billion. And meanwhile, it's a mess and all the streets are torn up and so forth. Why not just have a self-treatment system at every one of those? Replace the septic tank with one of those black water systems, and the truck comes around once a year to pump out the sludge tank, and that's the end of that. That's the new thinking. Cities are not yet thinking that way, but it's coming. And that's the new trend. So yes, there's a lot more of this happening, but we work with the housing developments because you'll see, 100 homes, 200 homes, instead of each of them having their own system, it's one central one. And that's what we do, right? Because it's more manageable for us. We don't deal at the single home level.
Right.
Because it's just different capitalization completely.
No, that makes sense. Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a little bit, Bitcoin. How can you describe how you're involved with Bitcoin?
Okay, so Starlink is in countries all over the world, and how do they get payments from all over the world to their headquarters? They use a tokenization solution. They use blockchain. The old method of using Swift and ACH and all that is disappearing fast. And what we're starting to be in the business of not just selling people a system, but actually just letting them have water as a service. So we put our own machine on site and they pay on the meter. Well, all those payments and so forth, and the royalties and the investor dividends and all that, you just don't want a bunch of ACH. I think just the other day, last week, we had fraud activity on our personal bank account, and it got resolved by the bank, but they created a new bank account. Now I'm sitting here, I've got a checklist: Schwab, Chase, PayPal.
It's been there.
More than 50 auto pay accounts that I have to switch over in less than 30 days. That's bullshit. That is just enough. We can't have that stuff anymore. So what we came up with was the idea of having a security, a coin that is a security. In other words, $H2O it's called, that is responsible. Its first job is to pay dividends. And if Carol Covino invests in water as a service, she has, let's say, a 30-year annuity, but maybe she would like to get paid sometime before 30 years. So she can take that blockchain address and transfer it to someone else. And now that someone else has the future revenues. So it makes it easy to pay Carol, but it also makes it easy for Carol to transfer certain rights. And that eventually starts to create a market for water treatment, because that contract you have that's sitting in the blockchain represents all of the future earnings. Well, it's very, very hard to sell that just as a business. It's very, very hard, but it's easy when you have it tokenized. So I think that's going to come very, very fast. It's going to be a silent revolution because it's going to happen at every level of finance. We'll see the robotaxi and we'll be whoa, the robotaxi. But the same thing will happen in finance, will be the automation of all that using blockchain. So yes, we're moving as fast as we can on that.
And then investment-wise, how do people invest? Is it part of a larger portfolio? Is it something you talk with your finance manager about? What's involved with that?
Well, it's very simple. There's two levels of investor. One level is unaccredited, meaning that they don't meet certain financial criteria. And then there's accredited, which means that you're making $200,000 a year, or as a family making $300,000, or you have $1 million in assets outside of your primary home. If you're that person, you're accredited. What we do is we service both. If you're interested in this and you want to throw $1,000 at it, that's great. Go to waterondemand.net and we have an offering up and running. If you think that, well, I can tell you this, that if you come up with a larger amount of money and you qualify as accredited, then you'll get a better offer. These are not syndicated through Fidelity or anything like that. Okay. This is Main Street stuff. These are direct offerings, and they give the opportunity for you and me to get in early on these things. Ashton Kutcher was in on round 2 of Airbnb. He made 50,000% on his money. I'm not criticizing Ashton. Good for him. But did we have access? No. We didn't have that access, at all. We had to wait for the IPO many years later. It's a chance for people to get in early. It's a private placement, in other words, and they go to waterondemand.net, and there's a really good presentation, and we invite people to jump on board, and the water's great.
What do you think is on the horizon next?
Well, the modular business is going to explode, and by that I mean we're ramping up to currently it's been doing, $2-3 million a year. It's been a startup, but it is going to blow up to a level of roughly $30 million by the end of the decade. More if we manage certain. At this point, it's completely capital. The more capital we can get into it, the faster it's going to go. So our aim is to create a unicorn, a business that's worth $1 billion. And so we need to obviously develop the revenues from these three divisions. The one that does the big systems, custom ones, the one that does the modular ones, which are assembly line, and the one that does the water as a service, meaning you don't have to pay up front for the machine, just pay as you go. But those three are packaged up in Water on Demand, and we welcome investors and who are arriving at a stage where it's being monetized. These divisions, the two divisions are cash flow positive. They're rocking, and now we want to crank them up. So we welcome people to jump on board.
Riggs, thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation, something I did not know a lot about. So thank you. And as we begin to wrap up, how can the listeners learn more about you, more about the company, and even investment?
Well, on X, they can follow Riggs Eck, which is my handle, and it's a lot of good stuff on that. They can also, if they go to OriginClear, we do a monthly broadcast every the third Thursday of every month. So the next one's on the 15th, where we do a tour of everything that's happening with the company and with water and kind of brief people, and it's very popular. So just go to originclear.com and you'll be invited to join that broadcast. And just one thing about us is that we are very responsive to people, emailing us and asking us questions and stuff like that. We love to hear because we're funded by regular people. So we believe in being responsive. So I can't wait to hear from you all. And join us on Legends of Water every Thursday night, 8 p.m. And it's always exciting. We know how to make it fun. Sometimes we even fight, but we don't have paper fights or pillow fights. It's all just friendly.
That sounds great, Riggs. Thank you so much. I encourage the listeners, go check it out, learn more. And thank you so much again. And to
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, wherever you are in the world, we wish you every blessing. Bye for now.